And thank you for joining our time together today. My name is Heidi Badir. I am the Director of Leadership Development at Paragon, and we're so thrilled that you're choosing to take some time for yourself today to learn more about empathy, especially as it relates to your role as a leader. I want to just set the stage with a couple things. Yes, we will want you to be using the chat, so thank you for testing that for us this morning. Please do feel free to contribute throughout the time using the chat. We also have the Q&A open as well, so if there are specific questions that you would like to ask, please use the chat or the Q&A specifically for that, because we have people monitoring that, and then we'll make sure that we can address those questions toward the end. We'll also be doing a poll throughout, so you'll have a chance to engage in that way as well. So let's go ahead and get started. Can I just, actually, interesting enough, I just see a couple people on my screen. Can I get in the chat to make sure you can see the PowerPoint presentation at the top, just so that we can I get and someone in the chat can throw up, yes, fantastic, yay. All right. So I really want you to position yourself in terms of two hats today as we get started. I would like for you to be sitting here as a leader and really absorbing and learning the content for you as an individual. At the same time, I'd like you to also be thinking about, as you are learning, how then you can use this information and content to carry it forward to equip your team. So as we go through the content, there are 4 kind of mini modules, and they can be used to help you as soon as you are finished with the webinar to teach back to your teams as well. So again, think back from those both perspectives. So I'm going to be clicking to a slide next, and it's going to have images of people with various expressions on them. As you scan the images, I'm curious, what is the first image that captures your attention as I click to the next slide here? And then throw the description of what that first image that pops into your view, what description into the chat for me. So on the screen, you see, again, various images of people's facial expressions. What is the first image that captures your attention, and throw that description into the chat. Thank you. I see some responses coming through. Thank you. Nice. Thank you. Now I want you to shift the view, and I would like you to look a little bit deeper into the faces of those on the screen. What images or expressions, if any, do you see on the faces of your employees? What expressions? And again, this is, go ahead and you can throw some things in the chat there too. What expressions do you see that might be reflective of what your employees are feeling as well? The research shows that people with high levels of empathy actually pay more attention to those facial cues and body language. So if we're not paying attention, we may overlook or even misinterpret how some of our employees might be feeling. So the next question I have is, and this is a rhetorical one, you don't have to throw it into the chat, but what image do you think reflects your expression today? What image reflects your expression? So just as you're observing your employees are likely observing you in the way that you lead as well. So keep that in mind as I click to the next slide with another image of 2 pictures. So when you look at this picture here, this is actually a photograph that was taken by a photographer in southwestern Kenya. And it shows a lioness carrying her little cub. And the photographer actually did this deliberately because they thought that it was fascinating based upon the view or the angle at which the photo represents and what it shows based upon that angle. So when you think about the way that you perceive your employees, as well as the way that your employees perceive you, it does make a difference. And it can be viewed negatively, or it can be viewed in a very positive light. So much like the photo, it's really about taking a look at how do we make sure that our perspective and how that we do show up is one that is protective and kind and caring. So as we go forward together, we are going to really focus in on 4 key areas. We're going to look at defining what empathy is, and not just from my point of view, but we're going to dig into a couple of researchers around that. We're going to also look at the impact that empathy can have on ourselves and others, and what that does to either build connections or break connections. We're going to then explore what could get in our way of actually leading with empathy, and then how can we strengthen our ability to lead with empathy as leaders. So to kick off the discussion around what empathy is, I want to look at a video. And this is a 3-minute video. So I'd like you to take a deep breath. And again, this is a great time for you just to unwind, sit back, and really pay attention. And as you do watch this video, I'd love to have you think about, how does empathy show up? So we're going to give this a try here, and I'm going to share. I'm going to share the video, and we're going to hope that the sound is working. Can you hear it now? Great. So as you take a look at that video, throw in the chat what you saw, how you saw empathy being displayed. What kinds of things did you see in that video that demonstrated empathy? Any comments? Yeah, exactly. So as you kind of reflect on that video, I'm sure there was a lot of different kinds of emotions and things that sort of came up, and maybe even situations that you can relate to personally and professionally. And I think that's a great place to start in terms of really looking at this from your perspective as a leader of just taking a step back, taking a deep breath, and really observing and seeing others around us for what might be going through, and even that they might be going through even things that we not be able to see. So as we think about just exploring a little further into what the definition of empathy is, I want to share with you 3 expert point of views, and this is certainly not an all-inclusive list. There are several researchers out there, so you're getting a little bit of facilitator bias. At the same time, I hope that these 3 individuals maybe are some new perspectives that you can be thinking about as you really define empathy for yourself and how you want to lead in that way. So the first one is Brené Brown. I wonder if we have any Brené Brown fans out there who maybe have heard of her research and watched her videos and read her books. I'm definitely a big fan. And what I really love about her research, yes, Atlas of the Heart, yep, all those good things, is she really talks about empathy is a choice, and it's definitely a vulnerable one. It's about connecting with people so that we know that we're not alone in the struggle. She also brings it up that it's about connection with an emotion with another person is experiencing. And she talks about it in a way that you don't have to necessarily have been through that exact same experience to experience the same kind of emotion. So maybe think about it this way, that maybe you have a new employee that's just getting started and they're a leader of people, and they have to learn the new human capital management system, whether it's Paycom, ADP, Workday, whatever kind of system that is, and they are really struggling. But for you as a leader, it was a piece of cake. So you're like, I don't understand what the struggle is. However, you recall when you first started that you had to learn a whole new process on how to manage the budget and the system around budget, and you found that frustrating and complicated. So ultimately, it's kind of having that voice of looking back and forth between looking at how that you can you can actually get to a place where that you have that shared emotion and that shared connection around the emotion, even if it's not the same kind of experience. So hopefully that's creating a little bit of a new insight, because sometimes I think empathy in our minds might feel like, well, I have to have gone through that exact same situation to be able to even empathize. But taking a step back and really thinking about it from an emotion standpoint can make a difference. The next individual here, his name is Roman Karsnek. He is an author and philosopher, and his research is really fascinating to me. And he brings up a concept around taking the empathy beyond just the golden rule, which is do unto others as you want to do unto you, but making it a platinum rule. So he talks about doing unto others as they would have done unto them. So his view on empathy takes us on a different journey of, he actually would like to think about it both from a philosopher in terms of a Socrates perspective around knowing thyself, as well as stepping into understanding other people's experiences. So he has this vision in some of his research where he would love to actually create an empathy museum. And his concept or idea around this is creating an experiential way for people to actually step into and experience some kind of work environment. So one of the things that he had as an example was maybe you create an actual sweatshop where it's a full room of sewing machines and you have to learn how to sew for the entire day and you get paid $1 at the end of the day. So what, again, thinking about that environment, being around that people, that situation, and what that might feel like. He also talked about an example of even a cafe could model this in terms of having on a video screen where it takes customers through while they're actually waiting for their beverage or their cup of coffee. They get into a video where they see how the beans are planted, the coffee beans are harvested, how that then they're made into actual, then the production of processing them, as well as the shipment, and then seeing all of the workers and all of the people that happen to be a part of that entire process. So an example of this then as a leader, thinking about an example from one of the individuals that I've worked with before. In the past, I've been involved in senior living, and at one of the communities that I worked with, they actually had each of the different leaders one time a month for 2 hours trade places with another leader. So you had the executive director that would trade places with the sales department. You had the plant operations director that traded places with the housekeeping director. And so it was a fascinating way to watch and witness how that just created a whole new sense of understanding the experiences that other leaders and other employees in other areas, what they go through. And the last researcher, and I hope some of these are sparking some ideas for you to dig into understanding new views around empathy. The last one is Eric Barker. And he is an author and a researcher that really likes to take the science behind different things around empathy and create new insights for people. So he challenges us to really create actually healthy tension. So not just asking general, how was your day, but digging into a little bit deeper about experiences within their life. So then that helps to open up a more intentional dialogue with individuals that hopefully creates a better connection as well as a deeper understanding. In this one, he talks about for 1 week, and let's hear you. I'm curious to see if anybody would be willing to try this. For 1 week, choose totally opposite things that you're used to listening to and to reading. And just to get a different perspective. So even a radio station, choose a totally different radio station, or a news station that you listen to, or a journal or an article or newspaper that you tend to read, and just start to expose yourself to different ways of views that people are communicating and thinking. So he calls it something around like mental diversity training. So even with these different viewpoints and different researchers, there is some commonalities for how leading with empathy actually has an impact on us. And to get into that, I want to share with you about the empathy continuum here. So this is kind of a lot to look at on this slide, but I just want to start with the boxes in the middle. So if we start in the boxes in the middle and start on the left-hand side of your screen there with unaware. So this is really when you are in a situation and meeting somebody, it's not that you're really not in tune to, or haven't asked or haven't developed that relationship, and you not really know about the things that make them tick. So as an example here, I'm going to just use a personal scenario. My stepdaughter recently started dating a new individual, and he came to meet us for the first time, and a delightful young man. And I love to feed people. So I love to have sweets and treats and lots of food available. And unbeknownst to me, I didn't realize this, but he was diabetic. And so here I am wanting to create this great positive social interaction, this environment, and I'm sort of forcing food on him. I was very unaware, very ignorant about that. And so then that kind of gives you an example from what that might look like on that side of the continuum. So now let's just say that he comes back for dinner, but I still love to cook and our family loves sweets. So why would I do anything different? So the self-interest view here is deliberately choosing an act that is better for you than necessarily the other person. The indifferent side is sort of, okay, now I'm more aware, and maybe that I want to do something different, but I'm still kind of hesitant. It doesn't necessarily matter. So I'm kind of in this state of just indifference. I'm not choosing to change my behavior, even though there's a circumstance there that might call out for it. If I'm really moving forward on the other side of the continuum, it's actually creating a way for me to observe and to even recognize the situation. So from this individual's perspective, now I'm like, Zach, I have things prepared for you. I made gluten-free dishes. I made some things that are sugar-free, things like that, that actually I understand now more about what you're going through because I understand more about your specific needs. And then that has led to a more empathy in terms of being able to become more aware and adjusting our behavior. So we don't just have the unhealthy sweets, we're better able to adjust. And that might seem like a silly example because, my gosh, who wouldn't want to help to support somebody that could medically have an issue with that? But think about our behaviors when we show up in a non-medically way, or things that we can't necessarily see, and how that really does impact us inside out. So now that we've talked through kind of the continuum there, underneath the continuum, you're going to see two arrows. And the arrow to the left, when you are showing up as a leader in a state of unawareness, or maybe you now have awareness, but you're still not going to do anything about it, or you just become so indifferent to it because it's maybe feels like a hassle, that that actually creates biological, physiological reactions within us that activates that fight, freeze, or fawn. And when we're in that kind of state, we actually shut down people's abilities to be creative, to think creatively. It creates defense mechanisms. We start to operate in our very much our stress mode. So that actually leads to disconnection. On the flip side, when you choose to show up, now that you become aware of something and are building that relationship and start to observe and understand and relate to those kinds of emotions and start to adjust your behavior as a leader for your employees, it makes a total difference in terms of that relationship. You can activate curiosity and connection. And so again, it just showing you that no matter what view or how that you're seeing empathy, once you start to actually open things up, you are going to create an environment that feels so much more psychologically safe. You're going to enhance those connections and build those relationships. So the challenge here is to be curious. So when others, you're seeing those reactions or things come to mind, it's being curious. It's also learning about people's perspectives. And really dig into understanding what maybe might be driving some of those behaviors in individuals. So the so what here is that when we think about that empathy continuum, if you really look at regulating your own emotions, you can also help to regulate and create a safe space where others can have emotions without fear, without anxiety, and be able to have some of those really great conversations. It also improves our responses to our employees as well as the responses that our employees have toward us. And as I said before too, it just creates that opportunity to have a really psychologically safe environment so that people don't go into that threat mode and you are able to more able to have those honest canvas conversations that really do lead to employees feeling a sense of being understood and valued. So what gets in our way? Right now, my guess is some of you are checking your phone, checking your emails, maybe you've taken another call, and those are all those kinds of things that come into getting in our way of actually being able to lead with empathy. So just want to touch on these things real quick. When you think about just stress, when you as a leader are doing things, or maybe you are being, from your leader, being micromanaged or micromanaging, that kind of behavior can create some stress between that relationship. You create anxiety and not knowing exactly what to do. Other ways that as leaders that can create stress, just that feeling of being overworked and trying to figure out how to manage several different priorities all at once. Maybe there's an aspect of that you're creating stress for somebody that they've had to compromise how they're able to fit into your team because of not being observant about their reactions, their responses, or not leading with an empathetic way. And then you end up operating out of your backup behaviors. So for me, I tend to retreat. So if I'm under stress, rather than trying to engage in that relationship with my leader, I might start to retreat or back away. Another barrier to leading with empathy is those distractions. Just as I mentioned, there are a lot of things that are distracting us around all of us. And I bet you can name them right now: phone, email, social media, lack of focus, those kinds of things. That distraction absolutely creates that barrier and doesn't allow for an empathetic approach to show up. Stories we tell ourselves. I think sometimes too, I've heard from leaders that thinking about the word empathy feels more like a soft skill or something that might be seen as weak. I'd really like to have you transform that thinking. Instead of calling them soft skills, really think about it as a power skill, because you can see from the empathy continuum the power and actually choosing to be conscious and acting within that conscious state to create some ways that build that connection versus break it down. I also think the stories that I've heard leaders express to me too is that, well, if empathy means I have to talk a lot about personal stuff. So that's not necessarily the case. It's not like you have to carve out 50% of your one-on-ones to talk just about personal life. So kind of take that out of your mindset, though there is an element of making sure that you're getting to know individuals. There's not a secret formula in terms of percentage of how much time needs to be focused in on that. And this line of thinking of the stories that we tell ourselves can actually be counterproductive and come across as inauthentic when we're not showing up that way. The next one is about vulnerability, and I'm going to let Brene Brown actually talk to us about vulnerability here. She does a fantastic job of leading us through the concepts of vulnerability. So let's take a look from her, and we're going to share again here. And can I have somebody give me in the chat if you can hear this? Hopefully,
in order for transformation.
Can somebody send in the chat if you can hear it?
For their success by any metric, money, stock price, market share, whatever your metric is, you can't get there without brave leaders and courageous cultures. You can teach courage. Oh, you can absolutely teach courage. 4 skill sets. Number 1 being vulnerability.
I bet you that not too many years ago, if you had corporate leaders talking about their vulnerability and discussing shame in the office place, they'd have been laughed out of the office.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's still the case in some places. It's just, if you're at the top of a Fortune 500 company and your success metric depends on creativity and innovation, and you've set up a culture where vulnerability is seen as weakness, don't expect great results.
Don't expect the creativity.
Yeah, because I mean, innovation by definition is idea, iteration, failure, iteration, failure, iteration. Places where they're doing the most remarkable kind of high risk, high reward innovating, huge tolerances for vulnerability. And so if you have leaders who are either preaching a gospel of vulnerability is weakness or modeling that, just don't expect great things.
You have said that vulnerability without boundaries is not vulnerability. What do you mean by that? I'm not sure I understand.
When I go work with organizations, sometimes I'll hear someone say something like, how often should I cry in front of my team? And I'm like, oh my God, like, that's not what I'm saying. Vulnerability is not about, self-disclosure. Like, I know leaders who never cry, who are very vulnerable and transparent. And I know leaders who cry all the time, who are just BSers. And if there's, vulnerability is great. Faux vulnerability or like fake vulnerability, because vulnerability seems to be a thing right now. That pisses people off.
So you're not advocating for people to just put it all out.
No,
there.
all I'm saying about vulnerability is that when you are in uncertainty, when you feel at risk, when you feel exposed, don't tap out. Stay brave, stay uncomfortable, stay in the cringy moment, lean into the hard conversation, and keep leading. Stay brave. That's all I'm saying. I'm not saying you need to overshare. I'm not saying you need to disclose. I'm not saying you need to weep uncontrollably to show how human you are. I'm saying try to be aware of your armor. And when you feel vulnerable, try not to transform up. Try to stay human, keep leaning. Very different things.
Any thoughts you want to throw into the chat about what you just heard from Brene Brown about vulnerability? Anything that stood out to you? So true. Yes, absolutely. I hope someday that I get a chance to interact and meet her. So now that we've had a chance to really look at a definition of empathy, we've taken a look at different views of from different researchers about what empathy means to them, how it can show up. We started to take a look at how that we can have an emotional, physical response and what happens when we lead with empathy versus when we lead with unconsciousness or unawareness. So let's give it a little bit of a practice. So we're going to go into next here about strengthening your ability to take a look at strengthening your own opportunities. So this is we're going to go into a few different opportunities here for you to see and experience, practice some of this. So we're going to take a look right here at strengthening your ability to be empathetic. So we're going to actually put in the chat, there's going to be a link to a handout. And on this handout that you just saw come through, if you want to click on that, we're going to go through 3 different exercises to rate yourself. And the first one, we're actually going to do a little poll. So this first one is about writing with empathy, and so we're going to take a little quiz. I'm going to pull up the poll and hopefully you all can take this poll. So there's going to be 3 questions here about writing with empathy. So it's just true, false questions. The first one is, when writing an email designed with empathy in mind, be sure to be as detailed and dense as possible. The more words you include and the more detail of an outline you send, the more time and thought you put into it, right? So enter true or false to that one. The second question, when a response is urgent, but no one responds timely, send multiple reminders, attach the original email with all of the details. True or false there? And then the third question here is, when sending an email, take time to be certain of the purpose. True or false? Just going to give you a minute here to participate in the poll. I see 11 responses, 12 responses, 13. There we go. People are responding now. All right. Doesn't look like everyone has, but I'm going to go ahead and, oh, one more. I'm going to go ahead and end the poll, and we should be able to see the results here. Can you all see the results? Just throw in the chat if you can say yes, you can see the results there. Great, thank you. What do you think about writing? Maybe the first thing about empathy doesn't come into mind when we think about writing, but really from the sender's point of view, it can feel great when you write long, dense emails and it lays out a bunch of information. But usually when you are doing that, you're actually detracting from creating a sense of empathy. So really, the point here with this one is, when you stop and think about the important objectives of writing an email, think about what recipients need to act on, can really help you to set the stage in terms of how you're writing. So before you write that next email, take a deep breath, think about what it is that you're asking and the way in which that you're going to outline the detail of the message. A lot of times, simpler is better. All right, the next one, around when a response is urgent, but no one responds timely, send multiple reminders and attach the original with all the details. Well, this one is actually false. Although I will admit that firsthand I have done this, and I've done this out of maybe a little bit of passive aggressiveness at times. So I will admit that my error there. But you know, you think about, especially from a leader, you've got a team of people, you're trying to get them to respond to something, or you need to take action. Nobody's responding. And so, you know, sometimes it might think, well, that would just be a great reminder on the original email of giving them all the details. The reality is that, you know, that can create a disconnect and create some anxiety for folks, or maybe they didn't really understand all of the information in there. So, you know, one thing that might be for here is to pick up a phone, have a phone conversation, or schedule a quick meeting if there's that much detail that needs to go into that. And if a email isn't always practical, you know, follow up with even 10% of your original email can be a great way to exhibit empathy in terms of when you're not getting the response that you need. So phone call, reduce the amount of information as you do that follow-up. The third one is when sending an email, take time to be certain of the purpose. Yay, 100% on the true, absolutely. I think from an empathetic perspective and the research that I was doing, it really does talk about thinking about your recipients. So are you trying to set up an email with them? Are you looking for them to make a commitment? Are you looking for them to respond with some specific action? So really be thoughtful before you go off on, you know, the email that you really focused in on thinking about that purpose. And if you can't just pick one or two objectives, maybe rethink about what that email tends to be. So now I want you to just take a moment on that handout and on the screen, you should see, hopefully you see my screen here, where it says commit to action. Actually, let me back up for a minute. First of all, I want you to think about rating yourself. When you think about how that you communicate and write with empathy, especially in email, I want you to rate yourself as a leader right now, where you are at. Do you really think about every interaction in writing in terms of leading with empathy in that tone and the approach and the objectives? And then based upon your response to how you're rating yourself, I would love for you to just fill in a commitment. I will commit to doing what in order to strengthen my ability to write emails with empathy? Is it slow down? Is it to be clear on the objective? Is it to be taper how much detail that I put into it? Is it also to taper my expectations on when that response might need to be back? So all those things, again, might seem just things that we automatically do, but if you do take a minute to take a breath and really think through that, you can transform the way that you do write with empathy and the way that people experience. All right. The next one, time to listen and understand. Take time to listen and understand. I have just another quick little breakout video here. I would love to share with you, but I'm not sure it's going to work here. We're going to give this a try. And one more time, we're going to give this a try. And I would love to hear if you can hear the video or hear it when I start pressing play.
You know, and
Can you
sometimes
hear
it
that?
feels like it's right up on me.
I'm going to start it over. It's just a 60-second video.
It's just, there's all this pressure, you know, and sometimes it feels like it's right up on me, and I can just feel it, like literally feel it in my head, and it's relentless. And I don't know if it's going to stop. I mean, that's the thing that scares me the most, is that I don't know if it's ever going to stop.
You have a nail in your head.
It's not about the thing.
Are you sure? Because, I mean, I'll bet if we got that out of there.
Stop trying to fix it.
No, I'm not trying to fix it. I'm just pointing out that maybe the nail is causing.
You always do this. You always try to fix things when what I really need is for you to just listen.
See, I don't think that is what you need. I think what you need is to get the nail
See, you're
out.
not even listening now.
Okay, fine. I will listen. Fine.
It's just, sometimes it's like, there's this achy, I don't know what it is. And I'm not sleeping very well at all. And all my sweaters are snagged. I mean, all of them.
sounds really hard. On, if you would just
Don't,
try to skip it.
That might be kind of a comical way to share with you about what listening is, but I think that it really exemplifies how sometimes we make assumptions or we jump into things or don't really take the time to understand what somebody might be going through. So I would love for you to rate yourself right now. Rate yourself on how often do you put into practice listening to understand? How often do you put into listening to understand? Where are you at right now? 1, never, to 5, almost always. And then based upon your response, I'd love for you to just jot down a commitment. What are you going to commit to doing in order to strengthen your ability to listen and understand with your team? Is it going back to some of those things we talked about that keep us from leading with empathy around distractions or stress, or maybe the lack of willingness to be vulnerable? So maybe some of those things about what you can do to look at ways to commit to building your ability to practice listening to understand. And the last practice is around conversational turn taking. I thought this was interesting because, again, when I was doing some research around this, I didn't automatically think about this in terms of empathy and what it means in terms of how you show up and how your team shows up in ways that build connection. But I want to read a quick scenario to you and see if this triggers anything for you in terms of why this can be a part of building your leadership style and building your team around empathy. So the scenario goes, I have an employee who is a great worker. His attention to detail is impeccable. He puts in the hours needed to get the job done. As far as the work product, I have 0 complaints. The problem comes on conference calls and in meetings. He speaks in streams of consciousness and no one can get a word in edgewise. All of our clients are eternal, and I need him to be on the calls to listen to problems and concerns so that we can take the data back and present a solution. He needs to hear the concerns firsthand. However, he starts talking with potential solutions, brainstorming, talking himself in and out of solutions, rehashing issues already solved. He can continue on for 10 minutes at a time having a conversation with himself. So really, this talks about that when you're in teams, that being able to help manage the conversations and managing everyone's ability to have a voice can really create a sense of openness, create a sense of being heard, creating a sense of having everyone be valued and appreciated for their perspectives. So as a leader, being aware of when there's situations that come up like this and creating an opportunity to create a break in that conversation can actually open up opportunities to demonstrate empathy in a big way. So now I want you to rate yourself. When you think about situations or meetings or your team in general, there could be some people that are coming to mind right now that are real talkers and have a lot of value to say, at the same time can be disruptive in creating that environment of safety. So where are you at right now in terms of how you approach conversational turn taking within your team meetings and in your team in general? And give yourself a rating. Again, we're not asking you to share this publicly with anyone. This is just for you to really create that self-awareness for you. I love the vulnerability some of you are expressing, exactly, and then seeing yourself in different situations. What I love about this concept of empathy, absolutely, it's transferable to our personal, not just our professional lives. In fact, that's what I hope that comes out of this, that it's not just for work, but that you improve all the relationships in your lives by seeing things through an empathetic lens. So after you've rated yourself, I'd love for you to think about what commitment that you're going to make. So what will you commit to doing in order to strengthen your team's ability to embrace conversational turn taking? And again, just take a moment to jot that down. So in general, the worksheet is there for you to reflect on. We've talked a lot about a lot of different things today, and hopefully you've had some new insights, or maybe you've rethought some things or had some new ways of thinking about things. But my worst fear would be that you would have sat in on this 45 minutes of time together and not do anything with it. So my challenge to you as leaders is not only to be hearers of this information, but be doers and be proactive, and really taking that time to listen to understand, to write emails and write things that are more empathetic, and really focus in on how to create that overall safety within your team to promote every voice gets heard and embrace that conversational turn taking. So together today, through self-assessment and some guided practice, these are the 4 areas that we did. I hope this is a start of many interactions that I get to have with you. I do want to just say that we're going to be talking, I just wanted to share with you that an opportunity that we have to get involved is Paragon hosts a IT leadership forum, and we're going to be doing that this fall, starting in September through December. And it is an incredible opportunity to connect with other IT leaders in Arizona, Minnesota, and Nebraska. Each one of those areas will be hosting in your area coming soon to you. So if you are interested, we'd love to have you let us know and how we can get you some more information about getting involved in that. So thank you so much for your time and being a part of this, and hopefully that you can continue to learn, lead with empathy, and hopefully have some new insights. Thank you, everyone. Make it a great day.